Hey, what's going on there, folks? Good morning, good afternoon. It's the Earthmaster back here on this Monday, December 4th, 2023, 12:22 p.m. California time. Latest activity shows a 1.6 out here in California. We have seen just a little bit of uptick here across the West Coast in the last 24 hours. Looking at the latest information here across the Western Pacific and the Philippines area, seeing a declining earthquake activity event take place right now. We didn't see anything larger overnight. In fact, most of the magnitudes here after midnight have been in the 4 and probably the 3 range as well. The USGS does not show anything below this threshold here. So obviously more earthquake activity than what's shown up here on the map, but it looks like for now most of the 5s and the larger quakes have been yesterday. So therefore, as I mentioned in my last update here, I think the threat of a larger magnitude event has been diminished. And of course, that will probably, this aftershock activity will continue for a little while. But I think the main threat here, as far as like anything bigger, has diminished, which is good news because there was a lot of shaking out here, folks. The last couple days or so, looks like we've seen about 160 earthquakes. Now, remember, this is only about 4 point. I don't even know if they go down to 4.1 or 4.2. It may even be, let's see here. They show 4.4. I'm thinking they're going like 4.4 and above, or 4.5, somewhere around there, because I'm not seeing anything below that level. So definitely a lot more earthquake activity. Obviously, the magnitudes don't stop at the 4 range, right? There's smaller ones, but what the USGS is showing is roughly about 160 earthquakes here of some decent magnitudes. And of course, the largest one so far has been that 7.6 with a 6.9 that we seen yesterday for the second largest quake there in this little event. Pretty large event, actually. So that would be a large earthquake, a large aftershock following the main shaker there, 7.6. And again, I think we may be past that threat of a larger earthquake potential. Always when we're seeing this type of elevated activity, and it's been proven with the Japan earthquake back in 2011, we've seen a similar type event, some 6s and even some mid-7s kicking up, and they thought that was the main quake activity. But within about 24 hours, there was that 9.1 that struck there in Japan, 2011. You guys remember that, right? And that can go for anywhere. A subduction zone, it could go for California. We've seen that back on July 4th, July 5th, 2019. Down here in Ridgecrest, they had that 6-pointer. I think it was like a 6.7, 6.9, and then the day later they had a larger quake. So there's always that likelihood of seeing something much larger take place when it's heightened like this. But I think the threat for time frame right now, the threat has diminished in terms of the larger potential, and I believe that 7.6 will be the largest that we see out here. But that doesn't mean aftershock activity is going to halt. Obviously, we're still going to see aftershock activity, and we may even see another similar magnitude around a 5 or 6 range, maybe even a mid-6. But the potential for larger scale activity, I feel, has diminished due to the amount of time that has passed here now. We did see a little bit of, like I mentioned, a little bit of a halting there in the large magnitudes out here as far as aftershock activity, but with increasing movement across the general area. Last night, this was not like this. In fact, the Java Trench areas and whatnot were pretty quiet, but we're seeing a spreading out of earthquake activity out here across the areas where I mentioned last night. The Java Trench is showing some elevated movement up here across the Andaman Sea. And also one little earthquake out here. Goodness, that's kind of an odd one. Out in the 90 East Ridge area in the Mid-Indian Basin. That's 4.7 coming in earlier this morning, well away from the plate boundary. About 10 kilometers deep. That's the defaulted level. Historically, obviously, most of the earthquake activity will be confined around the plate boundaries of the world, where all the largest plates intermingle. But we do see some earthquake activity out here in the Indian Basin on occasion, and sometimes it looks like these get rather large out here in the 6.0 range. So just kind of watching this. Again, I expected activity to be stressed and more amplified out here today across this region. It just makes sense in terms of the general plate movement and momentum. And obviously we're seeing that today, not on a large scale, but definitely over a broad scale area across this region here, Java Trench. Back over here across the New Guinea area, Papua New Guinea, seeing some force kicking up here as well. Definitely looks a lot more active across the entire region here today. Let's see what we got. Papua New Guinea. We got some further deep activity out here across Fiji. That's a Tonga Trench for that 4.5. One of the latest quakes, 531 kilometers deep. But this activity here around the Papua New Guinea and Vanuatu region, a lot of these are somewhat deep as well for this region. But all three of these earthquakes occurring after midnight. So increasing movement out here across the areas of the Pacific Plate. And even it looks like up here across the Mariana Islands. I think these are from yesterday, these 4-pointers. But big time picking up here across this area today. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll expect continued aftershocks here, and some of those could be large, but I don't think we're going to see anything above that main quake level that we've seen, that 7.6. All right, further to the west here along this plate boundary, looks like we've seen a 5.2 over here around India, actually Pakistan. 5.2 coming in about 4 o'clock this morning. Look at that warping of the land right here. See all this warping and stretching? You can see where the plates have traveled throughout time, tearing and stretching these mountain ranges and forming them. It's pretty crazy to see. You can definitely got some visible marks here on the topography of the map, these mountain range. There's some subduction zones that sit up here independently along that plate boundary. But for now, it looks like a 5.2 coming in earlier this morning. I'll keep an eye on this area, right? Because that's been a lot of earthquake activity in the Philippines, and a lot of stress and momentum has built up here across this area. And, obviously there's the potential for some larger scale movement out here across this plate boundary with all this activity migrating and putting the strain out here across this area. All right, let's see what else we got. Middle or the Mediterranean out here. Looks like Turkey's seen some activity as well. Did see a 5.1. That's actually a pretty decent earthquake out there, 6 kilometers deep. Also up into Romania, they've seen a 4.6. This one's pretty deep, though, underneath this mountain range. So we'll keep an eye, again, on the general area, pretty much west of all this activity, where we expect this strain to be built up here over the last couple days with all that migration of earthquake activity or migration of momentum of the pressure here across the plate boundary is what I'm saying. All right, let's see what else we got. Anything major going on? Looks like New Zealand, they did see a couple threes down here, 3.2 and a 3.3. Australia seen a 2.6. So let me go check here, see what's going on across New Zealand. Got to keep an eye on that because they do sit along that plate boundary, right? Definitely an area that can see some large earthquake activity. But it looks like for now, 2.3 being reported 3 hours ago. A couple other earthquakes here in the last day or so. There's that 3.4 North Island. Looks like it's mainly around this little bay area here. Not really seeing anything major coming in. Goodness. All right, let's see. Drums look pretty quiet across New Zealand. At least South Island looks pretty quiet here. There's some of that activity up around the North Island region. But again, it's a major plate boundary, and I keep saying it. It's common to see earthquake activity out there, but nothing of unusual movement for now. Up into the Alaska area, handful of earthquakes. Nothing big going on. Here's some earthquake activity. Just after midnight, we did see a 4.8 along the Aleutian Trench, and also a 3.2 a little bit closer to the Fox Islands, just about 8 o'clock this morning. Let's take a peek here at the west coast, see what's going on out here. Now, it does look slightly elevated in terms of earthquake activity, and we even got a little bit more activity higher than the 2.5 threshold. So last night we did see a 3.5 coming into the Big Pine area of California. That is off of the Owens Valley fault system here. You got Long Valley supervolcano. This earthquake relatively shallow, about 10 kilometers or so, related to stress up here in the southern end of the Sierra Nevada mountains. We also did see some activity further down south into the Octello area. This is a region that they've seen a little bit of swarming going on here recently. That 3.1 coming in last night. 2.6 earlier this morning, right smack dab on the San Andreas Fault. That's a little sketchy. Definitely don't want too much activity in or around this area, because I feel this region it's been building up time. It's been building up stress and pressure for quite a while, folks, throughout, let's say, about over 300 years since we've seen a major rupture here along the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault. So it's well overdue. There's a lot of theories as to why it hasn't happened yet. One of them is the amount of water, or the lack thereof of water, along this area of the state of California. And water does weigh quite a bit. If you have a lake out here, and without that lake, without that water out there, the potential stresses in this area may have prevented this from happening in recent times, but it's not going to stop it from happening eventually. It's just a matter of time before the stress builds up here enough for a big earthquake. But I'm always worried about seeing earthquake swarms around this area, or maybe even having a 3 or 4 around this region could trigger it if it's within a certain triggering zone. I think Dr. Lucy Jones has said within a couple miles. So if we have like a 3-pointer or something here, maybe a 4 directly on this area of the San Andreas Fault, that would not be good. We'd definitely be keeping an eye on it then. I mean, we should be keeping an eye on it regardless, right? This area is definitely capable and primed. Everything's primed down here for a large earthquake. And we're talking about an 8.1. I don't think anyone wants an 8.1 out there anytime soon. That could ruin a lot of people's days and weeks and months. So, a little bit of swarming going on down here around the Octello area. That's where that earthquake activity has been kind of swarming here recently. That's at the southern end of the Elsinore Fault. Now, specifically over here around the Salton Sea and the southern end of the San Andreas Fault, we do have one little earthquake really close here to the San Andreas Fault, 1.2 from yesterday. Not for sure if a 1.2 would be able to trigger that, but if we get a huge swarm of activity specifically down here, that could be an obvious sign that maybe something's about ready to pop out here. But for now, just general microquake activity. Most of the microquake activity is along the San Jacinto Fault Zone, and as mentioned down here along the Elsinore Fault. One little earthquake here in the LA Basin region, 2.1, Lennox, I think it's Lennox, 13 kilometers deep there. Also one coming in right now, it looks like. Or within the last half hour, got a 1.7. Quite a few faults out here in this region, but the main one we want to watch, of course, is the San Andreas Fault. Further up into Northern California, it's a little spotty as we get up here. This movement around the Clear Lake volcanic field is just typical. We see this all the time, so this is not any surprise. 1,172 earthquakes here in the last 30 days. Is that a lot of earthquake activity? Yes, it is, but that doesn't mean this is volcanic in nature and that we're going to see an eruption. This is all related to a lot of these hydrothermal operations here. There's at least one of those plants, another one over here, a couple more over here. No doubt we got heated areas below the surface, and these guys have found a green way of creating energy. I'm not going to go into it, but look it up if you want. Calpine hydrothermal operations is the process. Well, I'm not the process, but they're the folks that have a process there of creating energy. Go check it out. Don't feel like discussing that right now, though. Washington, 2.4, way up north here. Looks like about 7 kilometers deep. But for the most part, Pacific Northwest looks awfully quiet. Intermountain West region's fairly quiet as well. Let's give a quick glance here at Yellowstone, see if we got anything to chat about. Yellowstone's just been kind of quiet, right? We've seen these little bitty earthquake swarms that last for a few hours and then they go away. It's been a while since we've seen any big time earthquake swarming. I'm talking big time. Days and days and weeks of 2s and 3s. Haven't seen it in quite a while. I guess that's good news, right? But for now, earthquake activity is non-existent here across this area of Wyoming. Yellowstone National Park. Nice and quiet. Down in Texas, these oil fields here getting hit pretty hard once again. A 3.0 coming in within the last 15 minutes or so outside of Pecos, Texas. And I think we all know what's out here, right? We got, there's fault systems. There's the Delaware Mountains and a bunch of other faults. But for the most part, the earthquakes that happen out here are positioned out in quite a few of these oil fields where there's wastewater disposal facilities and wastewater ponds. There's some tanks, some ponds right here. There's reflection of the water. So, yeah, there's quite a bit of operations ongoing out here, and that's where all that earthquake activity has been recently. Well, one lonesome earthquake over here around the Appalachian Mountains. It looks like a 1.6 in the Tennessee-North Carolina border area. It's one area I want to visit. I used to live out here in Ohio when I was younger, but I have yet to visit, I'd say this area right about here, eastward. I would love to visit this region out here around these mountain range. Absolutely beautiful, I'm sure, any time of year. All right, let's see what we got for Hawaii. Things stirring up out here, or, wow, it looks like they're dying back down, or continuing to die down. Not a whole lot of earthquake activity. 6, that's it. 6 earthquakes. So let's see what's going on here just real quick. Give a glance at the Kilauea volcano. Their latest informational statement here shows that the Kilauea volcano is currently not erupting. Looks like decreased seismic activity in all these rift zones here. Summit seismicity was low over the past 24 hours. 1 event. That's it. Recorded deflation. Okay, so let's go look at the deflation event here. If I'm correct, and been saying this over the past few days here, no thanks. Not right now, USGS. I know you guys want a few voluntary questions answered there, but not right now. Maybe later, okay? I do appreciate it. Summit tilt meter here, last 2 days, showing decline, and we kind of expected that, right? You go back here. I wish I could find a chart that can go back the past couple months here on a scale. But if you've been following my videos, you'll see the same type of pattern going on here for the past couple months. Inflation for a few days, followed by at least 2 days of deflation. Here's our largest and longest inflation event, but it is following the same trend as these previous other inflation and deflation events that we've seen over the last couple months. So we're looking at deflation occurring. If my calculations are correct here, we should see this continue through the day and possibly pick back up tomorrow with another inflation event. Now, it's possible we could see it go above this previous record level. And I say record level here because it is at its highest level in 5 years since the 2018 eruption there at Kilauea Volcano, which was obviously a much bigger one. These past few eruptions have been confined and limited to the lava lake area, but this one I feel is going to be a little bit different. Definitely seen some good inflation going on, but right now, past 2 days, deflation. I don't think we'll see this pick back up today. More than likely, it'll be sometime after midnight before we see that gradual rise of inflation kicking back up here. So continue to watch that. It's been an ongoing thing. It's the influx of magma. I'd like to know why it's just why there's 2 days of deflation. You know, what is creating it? Is it it seems like it occurs every About every 5 to 7 days of inflation, we get these 2 days of deflation. What is, and it's on like a time scale. It's like it's programmed to do that. It's really odd. I'd like to know exactly why it's doing that. Every 2 days or every 5 to 7 days, we get those deflation events for 2 days. Either way, looking at the rest of the volcanoes out here across the area of the USGS map, shows all green across the Cascades. Typical ones up here around the Aleutian Trench, still showing some earthquake activity and occasional ash cloud emissions from a couple of those Alaska volcanoes, but nothing big time going on yet. The Iceland volcano, Grindavik, Iceland. Well, I kind of knew it. No update put out here. This is the 4th day of no activity. All right, double check, make sure we got this. I think we got the most recent information here. I bet this was a big letdown. A big letdown to a few folks out here, but a lot of people did not want to see this eruption happen. And it looks like it's leaning more towards this not taking place as far as the eruption goes. Again, this update was put out about 4 days ago. Let's go check out the earthquake activity ourselves, where I'm sure it's going to be diminished. Well, about 45 earthquakes here in the last 12 hours. Still around the Grindavik area in that linear fashion, and this is where that magma intrusion, that magma dike has been taking place here. Northeast of Grindavik, and there's a magma intrusion that extends through Grindavik and out here to the ocean, but most of the earthquake activity and the worry and concern has been around the Hagafell area northward within this region right here. Today, definitely still seeing some earthquake activity. We can't say with 100% certainty that these folks are out of the woods, but it's been quiet and it's been declining. And of course, the longer that it continues to do that, the less likelihood of an eruption, unless we get a major influx of magma, a huge surge from below that could trigger this and elevate it. Little separate earthquake swarm up to the northeast of our area of concern. But you got to remember, this whole area is a rift zone, and volcanoes pop up here and there, and it's almost always active. But as far as our most recent event here with Grindavik in concern, that town that they evacuated, right now things look like they are stable. No new activity, but doesn't mean that it's over. All right, space weather activity here. It looks as though we did see the arrival of the coronal hole wind stream, but our our magnetosphere basically has prevented any auroras from kicking up. Now, Kevin right here has a pretty cool graph. I like this. That's why I always go to his site, because it's just one of the best space weather sites. And there's other ones that are bombarded with 30 million ads, but I prefer his site. The coronal hole is very visible here. We kind of seen this kick up last night and throughout the evening and this morning so far. This is elevated speed coming from that coronal hole. Right now, this position obviously across the western limb, but when it was in position here, it takes about 48, 72 hours to arrive, and that was last night and this morning. Elevated speed here, wind speed, solar wind speed, that kicked up here. Along with a spike in the density, the protons here, and of course the temperature rising. All that would be a definite sign that the coronal hole had hit this planet. But the interplanetary magnetic field here is north of this line, which is 0 right here, right? A lot of times during strong events, we'll see this slip below this line, which is a southward tilt of the BT-BZ component, the interplanetary magnetic field. But that wasn't the case here this morning and last night. That was all tilting north. And that does tend to suppress the solar activity as far as the auroras. Right here, he mentioned the BZ component of the interplanetary magnetic field has been mostly pointing north. This condition is known to suppress activity, which is not great for the aurora sky watchers. So we were looking at a G2 class storm last night. That never happened because of the stabilization there of the BT-BZ component. We are expecting still some unsettled conditions here tonight, maybe tomorrow night as well. I don't know. I don't think so, but that's what they're calling here for the forecast. And that's probably it for a little while. That was a pretty massive coronal hole, but did not do much here in terms of the auroras kicking up. And we don't really have any major CMEs to look forward to as far as any blast from the sun in terms of flaring activity. And what we do have here is a return to quiet conditions, it looks like. There's a few sunspots here directly facing the Earth, but they are relatively stable. Even this region down here that I kind of said to keep an eye on, one of the newer sunspots, doesn't look all that impressive at all today. So there's still probably going to be a chance for C-flare activity, but we're not looking at anything major going on from these sunspots. That includes this area over here. We got one way over on the northeastern limb of the sun. Kind of hard to tell. I really don't have a good glance at it, even on the UV filter here. But we'll see what's coming around the bend. But for now, we got quiet conditions prevailing on the sun, and that will mean obviously some quieter conditions here on Earth as well when it comes to the auroras. 99% chance for a C flare, M flare at 30, X flare around 5% chance, but I think that will go down. Look at this solar flare chart. We are hovering around the B flare, C flare category. So we'll probably continue to see that here over the next few days unless we get something kicking up. All right, Storm Prediction Center here today. Not a whole lot of threat going on. We got a little area, oh goodness, little area of thunderstorm activity out here. And also up into the Pacific Northwest, but that's about it. No severe weather potential. Numerical models. Let's see if we can get these to work here, hopefully. Maybe, maybe not. Are we live? We are live. Still running strong, but the numerical models don't want to work here for some reason. Are these guys off? There we go. That was a little weird. All right. Temporary pause. Pacific Northwest and Northern California getting some rain, it looks like. Thank you. A little bit of rain here as we head into the mid-week time frame, Wednesday into Thursday. We're not really expecting much, but hey, the storm track is starting to shift down south slightly. I hope that remains in the forecast. We do have potential for some severe weather and wet conditions as we head towards this coming weekend. For a good portion out here across the east, we see that low pressure bringing in, picking up quite a bit of moisture out there and bringing back some cold air, it looks like, behind it. The blue ISO lines there showing some much colder conditions. California, it looks like maybe we're going to see storms starting to drift back further south here as we head towards mid-December. See those low pressures kind of coming down a little bit further, even hitting Southern California, so that's good news. You know, the Pacific Northwest always gets moisture, right? Well, let's bring that moisture down into California, right? We need some rainfall. Look at the total accumulated precipitation map out here. Over the next few runs, this will give us a good idea of where a lot of the storms are coming up. Well, there you go. Pacific Northwest, once again, getting a lot of rainfall. Beautiful weather up there. I like it. When I say beautiful, it means rainy and stormy and cloudy and windy and all that good stuff. California dipping in here, a little bit of the moisture, but it looks like, at least over the next couple weeks here, we got a decent shot of seeing some rain. I hope that holds out. And, of course, some conditions and maybe the potential for some severe weather out here. We'll have to take a look at that as we get closer towards the weekend. But for now, we'll keep an eye on things here today and see how they play out. The Philippines still seeing some earthquake activity. And as I mentioned in the first of this video here, the overall threat for anything larger, I feel, has diminished. Okay, it's been a couple days since that 7.6. And it is common to see some upper 6 aftershock activity. And it is common to see potentially a larger earthquake than the first original earthquake. This area has seen some 8-pointers out here. historically, but I feel the time frame has gone past that window. And we should see this eventually die off, give these guys a break from the shaking. And, I feel that potential for the 8-pointer has diminished a lot. Elevated activity around the region, so obviously it looks like things are starting to settle. West Coast area, we'll just kind of watch this today and see how it plays out, folks. Have a good one. Stay safe. We will catch you guys back out here later tonight. Take care and enjoy your Monday.